Hello, welcome to the Conference Board webcast. I'm really thrilled to have today Don Klinghoffer, the head of People Analytics at Microsoft, facilitating today's webcast. And before we start, I'd like to share a few logistical items with you. First of all, please use the question panels to ask your questions throughout the session. I'll be monitoring it and probably interrupting Don throughout the session with interject with the questions we have here. And if we don't get to answer any of those, we will make sure we follow up via email with anything that is left at the end of the hour. You can download the presentation via the file download pod in the bottom center of your screen. Of course, we will use the slides to moderate today's session. You can also use the full screen of the video or PowerPoint at any time by clicking the 4 arrows at the top right of the screen. Do not forget that we really value your input and evaluation, so don't forget at the end of the session to provide us with your feedback. And of course, share this program with your colleagues. We will make it available, the recording and the content on demand after the webcast on the Conference Board website. So without further ado, we will dive into the topic. And today the topic is trust. And while trust is not a topic you think immediately when it comes to people analytics, I think it's one of the cornerstones elements of making it work. And we're really happy to have Dawn share how she led this transformation at Microsoft, how she built in trust from the design, from the get-go, and how really helped transform not only the work of your team, but also how the Microsoft is thinking about building some of that element of trust into the products. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, take it away.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Klinghoffer, and thanks, Stella. We're going to go through some slides, but please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Actually, before I get to that slide, I'll tell a little story. I started doing this type of work about 16 years ago. I never really thought that HR was in my career plans. I was in finance at Microsoft, and when I would sit down and talk to my manager about what I wanted to be doing in 5 years, HR really didn't come up. But after I came back from maternity leave with my first child, I wanted to work part-time. I wanted to have more balance in my life. And so one of my former colleagues that I had been working with in finance, he moved over to HR to be the head of compensation and benefits. And he was looking for people that had more of an analytics capability in HR. And so he asked me if I would come over to HR and be part of this new team. And he said, what can I do to get you to do that? And I said, well, if you let me work part-time, I will come over. And he said, sure. You
believed him?
Yep, I believed him. And I did. I got to work part-time for 5 years. It was great. And I tell that story for two reasons. One, because never underestimate the power of your networks. Yeah. So much of the work that we're starting to do, we're looking at networks and truly understanding what that power is. And then second, never be closed-minded to what your future holds. I know that a lot of people like to ask, what's your 5-year plan? What's your future? But, sometimes when you say that, you can kind of forget about some things that aren't even in your purview. So I'm super, super grateful that I had that opportunity because I had no idea the field that I was getting myself into.
And it didn't exist at that time.
It didn't exist.
People analytics.
No, really. We didn't know. We didn't talk about that term, people analytics. Exactly. So 16 years later, I'm still doing this, and a lot of people have caught on. So a lot of people are doing this as well. So before we get into some of the slides, I always kind of chuckle when this goes on the screen. I'm not going to read the slide in detail, but what I would say is take the time to work with your legal department. Early and continuous involvement with your legal team is going to really help the people analytics team be successful. One of the things that I get frustrated about is when someone will come to me and say, well, legal won't let us do this, okay? What I say back is, well, then you didn't take time to understand their concerns, okay? Understand what they're talking about, what the risks are, and come up with a creative solution that meets both of your needs, okay? You might not get everything that you were hoping to, but you probably will get somewhere, okay? So that is the sign of true partnership, is being able to work with your legal team in a successful manner.
In our case, was always the question back, but how can we?
Well,
if we can this way, how can we?
Right, and what I say is start with little bits at a time. Like, think about what it is that you're trying to drive, and think about, well, if I can just get something incrementally, what would that be? Okay, exactly. And start kind of chunking it out, and oftentimes you can get something in the beginning, and then it will lead to something that you're looking for at the end. So good data governance considers privacy, confidentiality, data security, and culture and values. Okay, they all have a role in kind of the data governance that you kind of look at your company. Privacy is really around the laws and the regulatory policy requirements. GDPR, I mean, I'm sure many of you that are on the webcast know about GDPR, and that deals with privacy, but that's different than confidentiality. Confidentiality can be different depending on the company that you're in. There are certain companies that when they release data externally, they'll release salary information, or they'll release different diversity information that other companies might deem as confidential. And so it's important to really understand what it is that your company is looking to achieve. Data security, that deals with how you're going to keep your data secure. Okay, so whether or not you use SharePoints or how you restrict the access to people with role-based permissions, it's super important. I mean, data breaches are serious, and so that's another aspect of good data governance. And then culture and values, and I always like to say that every company is unique, every company is different, every company has a unique culture, and you have to decide what do you want to be known for. And at Microsoft, one of the reasons why we take this so seriously is because we like to say Microsoft runs on trust. We have an enormous amount of customer data that we need to keep, hugely secure. Well, you know what? We kind of model our people analytics, our employee data after what we do with our customer data as well.
And what's interesting about the monolithic ability of Microsoft to protect the data is the fact that you have global presence and you have so many legal considerations around the world that differ by country, by region.
Yes.
And once you get to sort that out, I think coming to people analytics, it's kind of like, we'll just replicate that. Makes total sense.
And it's never easy, but yes, at least, we have kind of some other groups to learn from. And that's always helpful. So trust. Trust is the foundation, I believe, of a successful people analytics organization. And I feel like there are three pillars. We talk about three pillars of trust. We talk about transparency, purpose, and value. We have learned a lot at Microsoft about some things that we could have done differently, we could have done better, and we like to take those learnings and kind of improve on them, and how do we do things differently the next time. A few years ago, there was a product called Delve, and we always test our products out before we release them externally, which is, I like to say, a blessing and a curse. There was a product called Delve, and Delve, it was a productivity product. It was going to help people be more productive, where they could get access to all the, well, they could not get access, they could view all the documents that they had access to in one place, okay? And particularly people that were sharing documents with you. Well, the communication about Delve didn't really go on as probably intended, and so employees kind of freaked out. They thought that all of a sudden all their documents were being discoverable by other people, and really what it was is if those people had access to those documents, then it would show up kind of in their screen. We learned a lot from that, okay? That communication is key. Communication is key from so many levels, and so we always focus on communication. Purpose is another pillar. Employees, if you're just kind of fishing around for data to see what pops up with your employee data, I can imagine that your employees would feel a little bit strange about that. So to have a purpose, it also helps your legal team understand what you're trying to accomplish. And so a clear purpose is super important. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other important aspects of purpose in a little bit. And then value, you should always consider the employees when you're doing analytics around how can we provide value to the employees, okay? And if you're doing some analytics that's not going to provide any value to employees, then I would question that and question whether or not you should be doing that.
Especially in people analytics. And the topic of transparency is such a critical component. Number one, on one side, it is more and more demanded by employees, and it's more demanded by a lot of the disclosures externally that companies have to grapple with and figure out. But at the same time, you need to have that and share it with employees, because only that way you'll be able to alleviate some of the concerns about the data that is being shared.
Right, and all of that has to do with building trust. And so when I was talking about the communicating, if more communication builds more trust. You know, employees feel like, oh, you're telling me everything. That's great, thank you.
I'm part of the conversation as opposed to being the receiving end.
Exactly. So transparency, you know, let employees know what you're doing with their data. I just talked about the example with Delve. You know, I have another story to share. This one was a little bit different. At Microsoft, we have a lot of people that focus on innovation, which is awesome. That's the culture that we're really trying to drive, and we want people to innovate. Well, so what that means, though, is sometimes people will innovate, and there will be some unintended consequences for that. So we use a kind of a homegrown HCM tool, and we're in the process of moving to SuccessFactors, but this tool, you could get access to all of the global address book information. So you could get access to employee names and their address book title, you know, that shows up, where they're located, what office they're sitting in. Also, when they started at Microsoft, which is very, very unique. You know, many years ago when we were a newer company, people wanted to know when people started. Well, now if you think about it, you know, when I say that I've been at Microsoft for over almost 22 years, I'm kind of dating myself. Like, you know, people can infer my age from that. So, you know, all of a sudden that becomes a more sensitive field. Well, some engineers took all of the data from our global address book and they created a tool called My Story. And all of a sudden you could go to My Story and you could look up any employee of the company and you could see how they've progressed in their career at Microsoft. That was a little scary for us. All of a sudden we were like, you know, I don't think that like employees know that we're doing this and they're probably not okay with this. And so we ended up taking it down. But again, we learned a lot from that. We learned that, you know what we thought was okay to be sharing historically, we might need to rethink that.
But that's what happens in a company with a lot of brilliant engineers. Just one to answer questions.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so moving on to another important aspect of transparency. We talked about communicating, and so we've kind of played with communicating to our employees. About 5 years ago, we acquired a company called Volumetrics. Volumetrics gives us access to a whole new data set that we never had access to before. It's all the data in the Office Graph. So it gives us access to email and calendar metadata, not the body of the email text, but just the subject line. But what it does is gives us a rich data set to understand how people communicate with one another, and to start to do organizational network analysis and understand behaviors that lend themselves to different outcomes that we're looking at, like engagement or sales attainment. Well, what was interesting is that when we started out on that journey, we decided we needed to communicate to employees what we were going to be doing, that we were going to start to do these types of analyses, and that we told them we'd come back to them. We'd publish something. We published an article we posted on our intranet site. We told them what we were going to do. We told them we'd come back and share some insights with them. Well, we did. And that was great, but what we realized is when we would publish some of these insights externally, we would get a lot more engagement from employees. So we've done that more and more now, as we publish our insights externally, because our employees read more on LinkedIn, in HBR, they read more there than they do necessarily on our intranet site.
Kudos for HBR trust building capabilities.
Yes, so it's definitely helped us in terms of building employee trust. So Purpose. Purpose is not only really important to gaining employee trust, but it's also a great way to help you prioritize your work. Okay, so if you think about purpose as being one of the pillars of building employee trust, if you're working with people that don't really have a purpose to the analytics that you're going after, then maybe you shouldn't prioritize that work. Maybe they're not clear enough yet as to what it is they're really looking to do with the information or the analytics that you're asking for. So when you have a mature people analytics function, I am certain that you will have more work to do than you could possibly get done. And so prioritization becomes an important aspect. And it's something that we do. We ask our customers, we say, hey, what's the purpose of this? What's the business purpose of this? And do you intend to take action? And if the answer is no, or they can't really answer what the business problem is yet, then we kind of say, come back to us when you've figured that out.
So if we go back to the volumetrics acquisition and the work you've done with analysis of the metadata, obviously the purpose can be multitudinal, and some of it can be towards the business and making people more productive. Some of it can be towards the employees' well-being and understanding how the communication flows, how people make decisions, etc. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'm going to actually share a slide that shares an example of what we've gotten from it. But it's true, this data has given us the ability to empower employees and managers. Okay, there's also another aspect of that metadata where it shows up in it's a tool called My Analytics. It's part of Outlook, and that tool is your own personal dashboard. Okay, so it's your own data. Your manager doesn't see it, HR doesn't see it, and that gives you insights as to how you can be more productive. Okay, it tells you when you don't have any focus time on your calendar for the next 2 weeks, and says, do you want it some to be scheduled. It will say, hey, you haven't met with one of your employees one-on-one in a while. Do you want me to? It looks like you're free in these 3 times. Do you want to schedule something? And so it's starting to. So these insights that we're coming up with, they're building it into the product to nudge you, to help you be more effective. And that's really where the employees can start to see the value. We'll get into the value a little bit, but also the purpose can be it can be a lot of things. It can be understanding where you need to have interventions, or it can be understanding behaviors that really lend themselves to positive outcomes that you want to push more.
And I think what's great is it gives you personally the power to make decisions in a very intelligent way, because you have the data and the information and the ability to trigger some of these downstream actions.
Yeah.
Without putting too much effort into it.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. So important corollary of purpose is data minimization, and it's kind of I would say a process that we use when we're doing analytics projects. And so when we talk about data minimization, we kind of talk about 3 kind of important aspects. We want to make sure that the data set, every data element in the data set is something that we're going to use for business purposes. Okay, and so I would say historically we used to just dump lots of stuff in the data sets that we're going to analyze just in case.
You never know.
You never know. We've really kind of thought twice about doing that. Another one is to use de-identified data whenever possible. I mean, it's not always possible to do that, because you do need to, oftentimes with analytics, you need to join at the person level. Okay, but you can join at the person level and then you can de-identify the data. Another thing is when we share results, we try almost exclusively to share kind of general trends, okay, aggregated results, okay, and we can't always do that, obviously, depending on the analysis that we're doing, but wherever possible, that's what we do. Because really, in particular, when we're looking at calendar and email metadata, we're not looking for individuals, we're looking for trends, okay, broad trends, and that also helps to kind of maintain that employee trust.
So James Ryan actually was asking the question exactly related to that, because when you go down to the individual level, there's always this discomfort, especially if you make or infer decisions about probability of leaving or abnormal behavior or whatever else maybe the risk management team will ask to look into. So I'm glad you clarified that and got it in front of it.
Definitely,
that it's not at the individual level.
So let's talk about value. We talked a little bit about it when I was talking about how some of the analyses we're doing, we're really kind of putting back into nudges, or we're working with the product team to put back into nudges to help employees and managers be more successful. One of the other things that we're doing right now, specifically for managers, is we're building what we're calling a manager hub. Okay, and so it's like a manager dashboard, but what we call it, it's an insights dashboard. Okay, so all these insights that we're getting, we're putting into this manager hub that's going to help managers have everything they need in one place, but also provide them with insights that's going to help them be more effective managers. Okay, and we're really excited to be able to launch that internally at Microsoft and see the impact that it has.
Will you deploy that externally as part of the product eventually, or not clear?
No plans right now to do that. Right now we're just focused on getting it where we want to be internally, but you never know what will happen in the future. We're really excited about that. And so, with that, I'll share an example, okay, of some insights that we've gotten using the calendar and email metadata. So at Microsoft, we have an email culture. We send a lot of emails. When I talk to our customers, I've realized that it's not just a Microsoft thing, that many of our customers say the same thing, that they all have email cultures too. I thought that we had an email culture because we created Outlook. But nope, everyone seems to have an email culture. Yes. And so, we wanted to understand the impact that email had on employees' perception of their balance. Okay, so we looked at just emails from your manager, okay? And is there a tipping point at which point you kind of say, you know what, I feel like I don't really have balance in my life depending on how many emails. Now, what's interesting is if you start to peel the onion, it's different between different roles, okay? And so actually our engineering teams have a lower threshold for the amount of mails that they can deal with from their manager than our sales organization. So that was an interesting insight for us. Then we kind of looked at just all general email overload. Okay, so any email, not just from your manager, but from anyone in the organization. And so, the story that I tell is, I'm busy in meetings all week, and I go home on a Friday night, and I decide that I'm going to clear out my inbox, because that's going to really set me up for success on Monday when I come in.
And we'll get all the stuff over the weekend out of your head.
Right, exactly. But I really never stopped to understand the impact that was having on the people that I was sending the emails to. Okay, so what happens is people wake up on Saturday morning and they see emails, and even if the email doesn't say I need this immediately, people think they have a perception they need to work that weekend, and so the perception of work-life balance is lower. And so it's a very interesting phenomenon that now there's a nudge in my analytics when you're getting ready to send an email after hours. It kind of says, really? Do you really want to send this email? Like you generate a lot of after-hour activity when you send emails like this. So again, this is how can we get insights that provide value to employees, empower them, and when they see that this is helping them be more successful, they want more, right?
Absolutely. And I'm assuming it's tailored by the time zone and to the
yes
definition of hours.
It does get a little complex when you're traveling, but because but it does take into account like what time zone you're sending things to and the time zone of the people that you're sending things to. They don't always know though if you're not in the time zone that you're supposed to be located in. So putting trust into action. So taking everything that we just talked about, I'll kind of share some things that we've done at Microsoft to try to help build employee trust. So the first thing's pretty basic. I mean, a lot of companies are trying to do this, or if they've done it already, is to create a rule book. Okay, and so it's really around, how can you get your policies, your notices? I mean, there's many ways you can share these with employees. They can be pop-ups and different tools. They can be confidentiality statements that you click through. That's what we have in our surveys. And it clearly says who has access to the data and for what purpose, okay? That, there's a team of folks in HR and people analytics that have person-level detail for this, to this data, but for analytics purposes only. Okay, that's super important to be able to share with employees what you're doing with their data. At Microsoft, we have a Microsoft privacy standard, and it's dedicated to employee data and data use and a data use framework. Okay, this data use framework is the basis for a lot of the governance that we have at Microsoft, specifically around employee data. We have a data protection notice for employees. I mean, some of this work came out of the GDPR compliance that we needed to do, but it's really great that we have this Microsoft privacy standard that we can use.
Is that by any chance published in HBR or anywhere?
No.
I'd love to read it. I think we are really, every organization is trying to develop a variation of this, and it's probably the space is mature enough to start building something that it's industry agnostic and more like a manifesto, like agile manifesto that was created, create some sort of a manifesto for analytics practitioners.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting that you say that. I've never really asked the question, could we share this externally? I probably doubt it, but one of the things that maybe are it's a partnership with our privacy team and our legal teams, and that they share kind of component, like what the component parts are, right. Okay, that they go into. So not really sharing, all of the details, but just
it's more the principles of thinking, like the areas that you need to really think about hard before you make a decision.
Exactly.
Either way.
No, I realize that it is something that a lot of companies are looking to, and as I talked about, there's, depending on the tool that you're using or the actual SharePoint that you're using, there can be even more detailed kind of policies and confidentiality statements in those areas as well. So I talked just briefly about governance, and that data use framework helps with our governance process. It's really, really good to have a governance process. And, I longed for a governance process for a long time. At Microsoft, everyone wants access to employee data. Okay, so I felt like for a while I was spending like 20% of my time kind of warding people off or explaining to them why they couldn't have access to all the confidential employee data that they wanted. And so it's really great that now we have a governance process, and I'll share with you the governance process that we follow. But people data can be sensitive, obviously. And I had a conversation with someone recently where I said to them, I hope that you can appreciate the fact that I don't share the employee data with just anyone that comes, that we don't share employee data with anyone that comes and asks for it. Because as an employee, I wouldn't want my employee data just shared anytime someone thought they had a good reason. Yeah.
And even if they have a good reason, there's always, it's a great filter to tell people, like, put yourself in the shoes of being that number or that record.
Exactly.
How would you feel about that?
Exactly. So part of our governance process is having an employee data governance board. And so this governance board is made up of people in HR, privacy, IT, legal, and this governance board, they meet on a regular basis, and they use this data use framework, okay, to basically govern employee data use. And what happens is escalations will come to the employee data governance board if they're looking for an exception to the data use framework. Okay, and so far there's been very few escalations, which is great. This data use framework is really kind of working. And this employee data governance board, they also are the ones that they set the Microsoft policy the standards that we use, and they set the data use framework. And so it's just a core team of people that work very closely together all over the company. We actually have business representatives as well from the engineering teams. So yeah, it's been very, very helpful to have this. It's very privacy focused, not as much data confidentiality focus, and I'll talk about how we kind of deal with the confidentiality aspect of it.
Do you have, especially if I'm assuming this is a global board, right? So do you have representatives from the European employee councils or some representatives of the European voices, especially?
So it is a global council, and so what will happen is that the Employee Data Governance Board will follow up with different works councils depending on what is needed, or the particular exception that that is being raised.
So how big is it? How many people?
The Employee Data Governance, I think it's around 10 people.
Sizable.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's too big, but And then it's for more on the data confidentiality side, okay, because the other tricky part is that it could be that there isn't a privacy risk to share employee data, but there could be a data confidentiality side, okay? And so that's where we have to weigh both sides, okay? And so that's where we have a data analysis governance framework, which I will share now. And this really tackles kind of the privacy and the confidentiality side, okay? So while there might not be a privacy risk, this is data that's sensitive and that we don't feel like it should be shared. And so what happens is usually requests will come in from HR mostly, but oftentimes they come from the business. And so what happens is we kind of get together. There's a group of people that get together, including our legal partners, and we, before we actually even go to our legal partners, we kind of sit down with the business or with HR. There has to be an HR sponsor, okay? But even if it comes in from the business, we have to have an HR sponsor for the work. If HR is not going to sponsor the work, then we kind of say no. It's not going to go. And then once HR is signed up to be a sponsor of the work, if it comes from the business, then we can go and talk to legal and privacy about the feasibility of it. And then once that happens and everyone's comfortable with what we're going to be working on, because oftentimes, oftentimes the business will come and say, hey, can you give me access to the engagement survey data, because there's something that we want to, there's some hypotheses that we want to test. And what we'll say is, no, we're not going to give you access to that, but we'll partner with you. Okay, we'll share insights with you, and we'll share insights that then you can use for your programs. Okay, so we do a lot of partnering without exposing employee data. And the project, once we have kind of all the green light to move forward, we set up the project with stakeholders and the scope and the business partnerships and all of that. And while we don't do this for every analytics project that comes to us, it's mostly the newer ones, like new data sets that we haven't used or new requests that we think are risky. It's almost like legal cases, right? If you don't have a precedent. Yeah, exactly. And even sometimes when we have a precedent, there will be times when we'll kind of say, should we rethink this? Right. Things change, the environment changes, and so we always want to make sure, have we thought about today whether or not that's something that we're comfortable with?
Yeah. So before we move on, I was looking at your 4 pillars on the team, because you have research work, you have more advanced work, so I suspect some of these projects come into that part of your team. But how then that team works with the data insights and workforce data programs?
Yeah.
How the information flows between the layers of your organization?
Let me talk about that, because we actually just reorged my team. We just made some big changes. So
first of all, how big is it?
I would say that I'm well-resourced, but not resourced enough for all the work that we have to do. So yeah, it's always a struggle, okay, in terms of prioritization, yet we probably are better resourced than many companies. But we also have, aside from just the people analytics work that we're doing for our employees, we're also partnering with the product teams on their tools, and so our jobs are they're big, and it's great that Microsoft is in this business and that we get to kind of shape and help provide feedback on the products that we're providing.
It's such a unique position for any HR professional to be involved in that space. I think it's so
yes.
cool.
So the team right now, so as you were talking about, I had, up until about a month or two ago, I had 4 main teams within my organization. I had an advanced analytics and research team, I had two what I call kind of consulting wings. One, HR analytics for our line business partners, and then one for our centers of excellence, or our functional areas like learning and development, talent management, recruiting, global diversity and inclusion. So they really help on the programmatic aspects. And then I have a reporting tools team. Okay, they partner very closely with our IT team on our technology. So while I still have those four teams, what we've done is we've kind of carved out some of the resources that we're doing more than just very cleanly supporting our business, our line businesses, or very cleanly supporting our centers of excellences. And we've taken them and we've created a fifth organization called Analytics at Scale. Okay, so one of the things that we were kind of struggling with, a couple of things we were struggling with. One is prioritization, okay, and the intake of all of the work. And so what will happen is that there was some duplication of effort at times because our organization wasn't clear that someone was already working on something. And while we're leveraging teams to its fullest and trying to help eliminate some of that, we really want a clear intake process. Okay, that will help us with prioritization and give visibility to the folks on the team on what's going on. Okay, another thing that we were struggling with is how do we do more at scale? Okay. Survey analysis, for example, everyone that's supporting the different line businesses and the centers of excellence, we're all analyzing comments, okay? And so we were thinking about how do we do sentiment at scale, And so while that's done in our advanced analytics and research team, this analytics at scale team will figure out how that's deployed, okay? So it has our cross-business analytics team. So when we deem that it's an analytics we want to do kind of across the company, it's analytics at scale that will be tasked with it. They will partner with the advanced analytics and research team. Okay.
So these are kind of deep expertise, and that's your front end that actually makes the company deployment.
Exactly. And so, not every line organization can have their own data scientist, right? So they're shared resources. And so that's another aspect of the prioritization and kind of where we tap into those. So, so we're excited about this change. We're excited to see, what kind of benefits we can get from this analytics at scale org. So yeah, we're really excited to get going with that.
Congratulations. That sounds like
thank you.
Exciting move. So sorry for interrupting.
No problem. Okay, so I think we're almost done with the slides, so we can just kind of have a conversation. But this kind of gets to your question about building a team. So I'll take the opportunity now to thank my team, because my team is just the most amazing individuals on the planet, and they help. They help in every aspect of the success that we've had by kind of pushing the boundaries, but asking the right questions. And they themselves are, they have expertise in understanding when things can be a little creepy, okay? I always say that it's super easy for a people analytics leader to do lots of creepy work, okay? And it's super challenging for people analytics practitioners to figure out how to do things in a way that's not creepy. So that's something that I really thank my team for. So they really do have they have taken training, and they really spend time understanding what privacy means, what data confidentiality means, and they all have close partnerships with legal. It's not just one or two of us that do. The entire team. I mean, our poor legal partners. They probably get inundated from us, but
we should create the legal department on your team too.
Yes. And so one of the things that we've done at Microsoft is which is very interesting, is we've made an annual privacy training mandatory for HR professionals. Okay, so
did your team develop that, or?
So my team did in the beginning. We have just transitioned that over to our HR operations team. They have now built out the privacy capability. They have a whole team of privacy folks in the operations team. I still have a privacy manager on my team that focuses on analytics, and she focuses on employee data outside of HR. Okay, so controlling that kind of employee data use. everywhere else at Microsoft. But this team that's in operations, they have taken over the annual training. So we did the annual training for about 3 or 4 years. And every year the training would change a little bit depending on the environment that we were in. Last year's employee training was very focused on GDPR. This year's training was really focused on our tools and technology and how we can use our tools and technology to keep data secure. So it's great to see that that's something that our CHRO feels that it's important enough that it's required, okay, for folks every single year.
And the other part that it's great is that you're kind of the experimental lab where you do the research, you figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then once you package and understand all the implications, then you can move it to the operations team to run with it.
Yes.
Which is always a great symbiotic relationship to have.
Yes, definitely.
So some questions we had is, what are some of the job titles that you have on your data and analytics team?
Job titles, so data scientists, I have analysts, I have a lot of analysts, program managers, okay, so
project management too.
Yeah, program project managers, because think about our listening system. Our listening system is a program, a really big program that takes resources to run. We have an onboarding survey, we have a daily pulse survey, an annual engagement survey, an exit survey, a soon-to-be transfer survey. So it's a big program that we run, and so we have those resources as well. We it's amazing. I think that there's a lot of people out there that think that that analysts, all they do is just analyze data all day long, every day. And no, we have a lot of other things that we do as well. And program and project management is part of the work that we end up doing.
Jeremy Shapiro this morning at the Human Capital Analytics conference, he mentioned that in addition to data scientists, there is another domain for all of us, data therapist.
Oh,
because you need to really have the empathy and understand the needs of the end user and get in the shoes of their experience and what they're looking for.
I'm definitely taking that one home with me. We also have industrial and organizational psychologists on the team. And so, there's a lot of different, I would say there's a lot of different skills that make up the people analytics team. I like to say that we're a puzzle. Okay, and that every piece is just a little bit unique, and that if you get the right mix of everything, it fits into this beautiful picture. So
it's not just data unicorns that you're looking
for. No, because you can't find those data unicorns. So Ian yesterday talked a lot about the data unicorns, and he and I definitely see eye to eye in terms of how you have to fit these different skills together with different individuals, and together it makes up a very successful organization.
So for all of those HR practitioners who are worried about not having data science skill, it's okay. As long as you have curiosity and a little bit of open-mindedness about what might be part of the team, I think there is a lot of opportunities in this space.
Well, and even, privacy experts in privacy. People often ask me, like they'll come and we'll have informal career conversations, and they're not in HR, they're in other data analytics fields, and they ask the question like, I want to get into people analytics. Can I do that? It's like, absolutely. We've done everything. We've taken people that have a little more HR experience and tried to teach them analytics. We've taken people that have deep subject matter analytics experience, and we've taught them HR. We take people from finance. We take, consulting firms.
Everyone.
Yeah,
we're very inclusive.
Exactly. Very inclusive. And really, a lot of it has to do with the passion that you have and how you think about this type of work. Okay, and again, when I interview folks, I want to make sure that they are thinking in terms of these pillars of trust, that they're thinking about building employee trust and transparency and purpose and value. And I can get a sense for some of the questions I ask, whether or not people are going to go into this field because they have some type of vendetta that they're trying to, prove or something like that. You really kind of have to take yourself out of this a little bit and think about, the organization.
Yeah, that's great.
So I just like to close with this slide that in the end, it's all about the people and building and really, if you can be successful in building that employee trust, it will go a long way in terms of the success of your people analytics function.
And I think that's one big differentiation between all the analytics fields and spaces, because we really have to deal with human beings and careers and livelihoods. So behind every number and every decision that is being made as a result of our work, there's a life impacted, right?
Yes.
So it's a very different degree of responsibility, and making sure we keep in mind bias and unintended consequences that may result out of the work we do. So
yes.
So we had a few questions from the participants. Can you give us some example of the types of projects you're talking about that goes through the governance review board?
Yeah, so pretty much all of the projects that we started doing using the calendar and email metadata started going through that governance framework, okay, because it was new. It was a new data set that we weren't using before. So we've done some work with our sales teams on sales attainment, okay, and understanding different behaviors that lend themselves to folks that are kind of meeting their revenue attainment versus folks that are not. And we partnered very closely with the sales team on that. That definitely went through the governance process. We're doing some work with our worldwide learning organization right now. That also went through the governance process. Because again, we're using kind of a new data set that we weren't using before. So definitely whenever we use a new data set, we always want to go through the governance process. Or if we feel like there's something, you know, if the business comes to us directly and doesn't go through HR, we always push it through the governance process, okay? So there's another example. There's a person that came to me. He runs our customer satisfaction survey, okay? And he said, I'd really like to do some work on correlating customer satisfaction with employee satisfaction, which is something
very logical.
Yep. Yeah. But the first question I said is, do you have sponsorship from HR? And so we kind of work together to get the right people involved in HR to sponsor some of that work. We're just in very, very early stages of that, but that's another example. It's like we're not going to give him or his team access to the engagement survey information. They're probably not going to give us, detailed information on customer either, but we're going to figure out a way to partner together, okay, so that we can work on this.
I remember somebody was, in my early days in analytics, said like everything is a line of code. So it's not really about developing a technology that will help merge the data. It's about having that agreement and putting the right type of infrastructure in place.
Yes.
To make sure the data is protected and the right decisions are made. So that's exactly what you're approaching. It's just a line of code, but you're solving it with the right mindset.
Yeah, it's helped our legal partners also because they know that we will come to them and that it's a predictable process. We kind of know the steps that we take. So.
And that's another thing, is like legal is not the enemy. They are trying to protect the company, they're trying to protect the team, they're trying to protect you as an individual. So
yes.
It's the best partnership ever. And I found actually very helpful to work with legal team as well as the works councils team, because it makes your solution better as a result. Yes, it may take a little longer, but as a result of it, it will be much better in the end. Do you have any go-to resources for training your team?
So it's a really great question. First of all, there's a ton of resources out there now. Okay, 5 years ago, there wasn't as much.
Before GDPR.
There wasn't as much, and we were creating a lot of them ourselves. Okay, and our privacy program manager was helping the team get educated on a lot of this. I feel like now there's a lot more out there. I don't have any specific recommendations, but I certainly can follow up with you, Stella, afterwards and connect you with some resources that you can send to the members.
Because we also do some of the publications, and I think GDPR was one topic that was on the agenda for the research team last year. So it's always great to provide to our members access to that updated information.
Yep.
What type of data do you need to get an executive sponsor to back your initiatives? Maybe not data. I think it's probably what type of information that will.
Yeah, so it's around the purpose and the value. I mean, that's the type of information. So, you need to understand, like, who is going to use the information, okay? Who's going to take action on it? If we can't find someone that's going to use it, take action on it, make decisions based on it, then why would we do the work, right? Because what's going to happen with it? So that's what we need to truly get to get that executive sponsorship. And it's not necessarily executive sponsorship. It's just, HR. Actually, I guess it kind of is HR executive sponsorship. That's what we're looking for, is that, someone in HR, a senior leader in HR is saying, yes, this is important for our business. And these are the actions that we're going to take depending on what happens with this.
So we have couple of more questions here, but I want to tackle one that is kind of top of mind, and I keep hearing a lot of noise and diverging opinions about it, and it's related to the Business Roundtable, a recent release of the new statement of the corporate purpose, which, for those of you who haven't had the chance, go search businessroundtable.org. You'll find the new purpose, and it's in essence moving from the shareholder primacy, so focus on creating shareholder value, to a multi-stakeholder perspective. One is customer centricity, second is investing in your employees, that I want to talk a little bit more about with you. Third is your supplier community. Fourth is your community in which you work and operate, and then the last one is long-term shareholder value. And when you look at the employees paragraph related to employees, a lot it will eventually tie back to measurements that you disclose, and transparency that will need to be put in place around what you disclose and to whom. And I think it will create a very interesting challenge for people analytics practitioners. Like, how do we think when we say fair compensation? What is fairness, and how you define that? Is it equity? Is it more than that? It gets very complicated very quickly. Have you started even considering what the implications of BRT is going to be on the measurements that you're going to produce? Is it too early? Like, how would you advise others in this space to start even looking at that?
So I don't think it's too early. We're always kind of thinking about, so while this kind of has occurred most recently, Microsoft has been focused on our suppliers, and we came out, I think it was about a year ago or maybe longer, that said, our suppliers need to provide maternity leave, family leave, maternity, paternity leave, family leave when that occurs, and that we were kind of mandate that. So we take this very, very seriously. We want to make sure that when people are doing work with Microsoft, that they're doing it they're treating their employees well, right? There's a lot of talk about these ISO standards. Have you?
Yes.
Okay, you've heard about the ISO standards. I think that it's going to happen. Eventually there are going to be requirements for the SEC or something that will come out that will require additional reporting that we don't have today. And so what I would say is get ahead of it, because I took a look at it and I was kind of relieved to see that if we had to in the next year, we could produce any of it. But there are probably a lot of companies out there that aren't ready. And what I would say to that is technology can help you. Where 10, 15 years ago, we needed humans to do so much of this work. So many companies didn't have HR data warehouses at that time. Well, now companies do, and there are companies like SuccessFactors and Workday and tons of technology that can help you kind of organize your information. And then you have all of the additional technology like Power BI and Workplace Analytics and tons of different technology to help you in this journey. But yes, I would have people kind of get ahead of it, because we don't know when I am certain that we'll get some type of notice, that it won't be like next month you have to start releasing this type of data with your releases, with your when you do your earnings release or something. I don't know. I just don't know what will come of it. But I do think that Data transparency is becoming more and more something that people are focused on, and they're not asking for individual, identifiable information. This is stuff that's reported in aggregate, and I can see that it will be important.
Yeah. And I think the other encouraging part is the fact that it is about human capital and how organizations treat and engage and reward and develop and upskill its workforce. And I think that's something that has been so far behind, as treated always as a cost factor, something to be managed and reduced, as opposed to something to be invested in and treated fairly. And I think it's great to see some of these developments. And I know SEC has something for review in this space as well. There's a lot more conversations about using human capital analytics as a component, or measurements about the treatment of the human capital as part of the sustainability agenda. Because if you're investing in your communities and your employees, you create a much better sustainable long-term business, as opposed to going and being at the mercy of the fluctuations of the market.
Definitely.
So it's going to keep the field of analytics engaged and employed for years to come, which is also great.
No, it's good. But what's interesting is that if you look at that list, if you're really just getting into people analytics, that list can help you also kind of get started. The ISO list. And I know maybe you'll include the link to the ISO standards for people to see and look at that.
Perfect. So there is one last question that probably we have time for. If we're thinking about starting up an analytics function, any suggestions on book titles that we can look into? So I think, going back to your roots, what would be the best process and place to start? And then any inspirational stories or books or experts?
So there's one person that I feel like he does an outstanding job in providing content, and that's David Green. And if you're starting out building a people analytics organization, you could probably spend your entire time just reading the articles that David puts together, but there is so much good information in those articles. They also, Jonathan Farrar and David Green also have at least one book that they've published. I think it's called The Power of People, and that's a really good read. There's also, this is an older book, but it has a lot of inspiration in it, People Rules. It was by Laszlo Bock, who was the former chief people officer at Google. A lot of great inspiration in kind of how they built their people analytics team there. But yes, there's a lot of content. More than, even if I think back 5 years ago, it's exploded, the amount of information that's out there on LinkedIn and HBR and lots of other great things. And you can also link in with people. Link in with people and connect with them and talk to them about, their journey. I've shared mine a little bit today, but everyone has their own unique story. And again, coming back to the beginning where we say don't underestimate the power of networks. Building your network is really important.
And I don't know if we found this to be true, but especially here on the East Coast, we found that people analytics practitioners are a special breed. I think they are so welcoming and so open to sharing information. There's no sense of, here's my intellectual property and I'm not going to share it. There's so much sharing and so much content, and people really genuinely care about developing this space in the right direction. And it's, I find it so rewarding to connect with some of the, especially newer entrants into the space, because they have a very different perspective, very fresh and very optimistic for all of us ahead. Okay, so we have a lot of thank yous from the participants. I hope everybody got something that they can take back to their role, and if nothing else, the inspiration that analytics is not just for data scientists or data therapists or whatever specialty you choose to. It's for everyone. Just because we can make decisions, we can build the trust with our workforce, we can help the leaders solve problems, and ultimately can help our community thrive too. So Dawn, it was such a pleasure having you on the webcast, and we look forward to sharing other materials that you'll provide to our members, and then having you at the future events.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.